Hey, everybody. I'm dancing like Tom Jones. Okay. Hi, welcome to today's program. Yeah. Okay. So I finished yesterday's page. I posted that up earlier on, and I unplugged my music. Hey, there we go. We're fixed. Okay. So let me switcheroo the camera here, and there we go. This is the title of today's page. Just letting you know that right now. I started playing with this already. Yesterday's page is The Devil is in the Details. And so the suggestion for yesterday's piece was, I have it written down somewhere, a demonic roommate like actual demons such as Beelzebub or Lucifer. And this is what I did. I like the idea of when people are suggesting, hey, welcome aboard, Jim. I like the idea that when people are suggesting disclosure about their roommates, they always describe them as the devil. Oh my God, my roommate's a nightmare, or the devil, or I'm living with Lucifer. And so I played off of that because I've seen a few comics where somebody actually lives with a demon, and so I don't want to draw another one of those. But I like the notion of it. So I did the page yesterday. I had an awful lot of fun working in my lab with mixed media. And so a lot of the pages that I did, a lot of the panels that I did for this, I did in that mixed media approach that I usually take with stuff, and had some fun. So, okay. Got that all scanned up, got that put together. The previous page that I did was Sam the Private Eye. I've now colored it. I've got to scan it, and I'll put it in my Patreon after that. But this is because I got to color it in the same way as I've colored these ones. Okay, so that's the update on that sucker. There's yesterday's, and today's is called My Beautiful, My Beautiful. Yeah, so I'm having fun. I had a suggestion come in last night, and I'm really excited about this suggestion first and foremost, because it's from my father-in-law. My father-in-law is 86 years old. When he was a boy, World War II was going on, and he had at different points to hide from the Germans that were inspecting his village. They were looking for him, and for whatever reasons, and he would have to hide from them, and that's a rough way to grow up. Is the understatement of the year. But we were over there last night, and while we were over, he said to me, "You know what you got to do? Do a comic about that balloon." So when you're given a suggestion like that, you got to run with it. Because my response, of course, was, what balloon? Because this guy doesn't watch the news. And so he let me know about this Chinese spy balloon that's been flying over the United States that got shot down over the last, I don't know when. And I thought that's a lot of fun. But in typical Christopher fashion, you know how serious I'm taking this one. And because it's very important that we really fully represent this balloon situation. So hence my title of my beautiful, my beautiful. And if you look that up, look up and away. You'll see what I'm referring to. But so I'm working on this page about the balloon, and I got some ideas for it already. But it's going to include playing around with some perspective on things again. And when I talk about playing around with perspective, I'm not just talking about the physical, visual perspective in a page. I'm talking about, our thinking perspectives. That's what yesterday's page, that's what my turn was on that. It wasn't about just, not wanting to draw demons or monsters. It was about, well, let's use this as an opportunity, as a vehicle for us to explore those human relationships, about people living together as roommates, and how you go from this paradigm shift of living with your parents or living on your own or living with other people to have to live with a new person. And there's always those new dynamics with these new people. And so they can be represented as the devil according to the way you're structured for living. So that's the shift, the different interpretation, the different perspective, the take on that piece. My perspective on this Chinese balloon thing, there's so much about who's right, who's wrong, whether it is, whether it isn't. Is it a conspiracy? Isn't it? Isn't it? Is it spying? Isn't it? You know, it's a balloon. It's a balloon. Let's do a comic about a balloon. So that's my idea. So the first thing I've done is put together this banner head for it. The page is going to be called My Beautiful, My Beautiful. And if you look up, and I'll do some references towards this, but that's the reference for today's page, is that balloon. And the Chinese spy balloon, that's doing on that. So that's my father-in-law's suggestion, and I'm going to do it because when he gives me a suggestion, I'm going to follow it because I respect that man greatly. And his ideas are fun because they're highly interpretive. So, you know, if you stand wherever you stand on this politically, if you what your perspective is or isn't on it, I respect that. That's the whole thing. I don't have any statements to say about whatever it is or isn't. I just don't. But it's an opportunity to draw the most beautiful thing ever, a balloon. There's a little film when I was a kid about a little kid chasing a bag through the streets. It's the most beautiful thing they ever saw. This little plastic bag blowing in the wind. I'm just so smitten with this film as a kid. It's the strangest things that we connect to. And for me, I love stuff like that. I love things like that. Oh, we got somebody else saying something. Oh, it's Gary. How you doing, Gary? Hello. So yeah. So if you're wondering what my perspective is on the balloon incident, you're about to find out. So yeah, here we go. I've looked up. I watched a news report on the balloon situation, and it's just basically the American president confusedly heading his way to his car and then having to stop and answer questions. So, yeah, we took care of that. That's it. That's all I got. That's the whole American president take on it. I don't know if he had a far more involved speech someplace else. I would think he did, but I think that it's just a talking point for a moment. It's just something that keep us jibber jabbering. It's a lot of change is going to be happening in the world between a lot of nations and a lot of things, and it's almost like some of this stuff is just occupying us in the meantime. But so I like the idea of the balloon. I like the idea a lot of the potential for story that it presents to us, and you know, there's something fun in that it gives us a chance to sort of explore in a fun way. And I think that that's the thing about comics, is that we can take what's happening in the world around us and reevaluate it in such a way as to say, is this as serious as this is being made out to be here? Or is there a different take that we can have on this? Like, is there a different perspective that we can have that's going to liberate our anxieties from stewing us over? Is this the end of the world? Is this going to be a war? It's a balloon. It's people are upset you shot a balloon. I wish it was a nicer situation, but it's a lot of stuff over a balloon. So let's just focus on the balloon part of it. I said I wouldn't be all political about it. Is that political? I don't know. All right, so I'm just going to throw out this. Yesterday's page was highly mixed media. I tried so many fun little things out of the mixed bag of tricks that I carry around with me, that my thought today was, I'm just going to do a straightforward black and white comic, and immediately did. So So we're going to have fun. But my thought is this. Let's lay it out together. Let's talk about the breakdown of a page and see how this comes through from conception point to finished result. Now, I've only been thinking about this for the last, I don't know, half an hour. And when I looked up the article that my father-in-law was talking about, I want to get yesterday's page out and done and on its way before I start thinking about today's. What are we doing today? What's today's process? And so because of that, I haven't put too much deep planning thought into this. But here's the idea. There is a song written by Sammy Davis Jr. called "Up, Up and Away," and I think it is sung by. Oh, I can't remember the name of the singing group, but they're really fun. Anyways, so I'm going to incorporate that into this page. I'm going to incorporate that as some fun. That's also going to be here in the structure of our bit. And so what I mean by that is, if I look at one perspective as referring to the real life events, like I'll put together a little map of there we go, 99 Luft balloons. Could you imagine if it was 99 Chinese balloons? It'd be a free for all of missiles flying in the sky. That's a good song too, though. It's not as fun though in my head because, Up and Away. If you look at the Up and Away, if you look at the lyrics for that, I mean, it's probably talking about something else. Let's be honest. But it's just that up and away. It's just so fun. It's just happy good time music. So yeah, that's a different take. It's a different approach to this balloon situation, is to trying to make it a positive. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And I'm going to put together a couple different courses of elements. And well, why don't you show us, Chris? Well, why don't I? Why don't I have a piece of paper available for me to do just that? I got to keep note paper around, folks. Back of the paper I'm working on. Now let's do it here. Okay, so yeah, that's my note paper. That's why I couldn't find it. All right, so if I've got my beautiful, right, times 2. I aren't writing that twice. So that's my title. The idea is to do our balloon in the sky. There's our first image. And then I want to cross 2 structural narratives at the same time. So one is taking snippets from this song by Sammy Davis Jr. Would you like to ride? Right? That's the first line. And then incorporating the My Beautiful. It's about a balloon. So that's the one narrative that's just going on with these pretty pictures of this balloon floating through the sky across the world. And underneath that first narrative is going to be a secondary narrative that we're going to also do images simultaneously for. And those images are of the map of America and the different military installations that it's flown over, and the American president saying, we're gonna take care of that. He never looks like he's looking at the camera. He always looks like he's wondering what's going on off stage. I like that guy. So that's what's going to happen, is that these two things are going to overlap with each other. And so we're going to do this similar in the style of how I did yesterday's page with overlapping panels. I want to take that a step farther in today's page. Now, yesterday's page, and let me jump back to that for a second, and just to refer what I'm talking about here. In yesterday's page, the narrative moves through. Whoops, I didn't switch my camera up, and I'm sorry for that. Okay, in yesterday's page, the narrative moves through the panels, but connects all of the panels together, and you follow the train of the narrative, ideally, so that your eye moves throughout the page in this sort of this little sweep of a pattern of this little loop. It brings you back down around here, and it ends in the point. It's all there in the details. But this is all unified images that example the narrative. Whereas in this context, what I'm talking about doing today, so I've got the logo header, and then I've got these two sets of panels that'll be overlapping. But in this, the different context here is that this is narrative A, and this is narrative B. And so while we've got dialogue balloons that are referring to this song, Up, Up, and Away, and playing on this whole, it's just a balloon notion, underneath that is the reportage. That's there's the American map with the installations on it. There'll be a little bit of dialogue towards that. There'll be the American president making his, as these people are saying, what are you going to do about a president? I'm going to shoot it down with my rifle, and then, we cut back to it it's above the ocean, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the missile hitting it. And then I think then that's the question, of course, is do I have the balloon, the explosion part, and then the boat cleaning up the balloon? And so that is the resolve point that ties together both narrative A and both narrative B. So that's the principle I'm playing with today. Now, in laying this out for you, the question therefore is, when we look at real world events and we look at real world issues, now I have a bit of it's not that I'm necessarily sarcastic as much as it is that I try to, be a little upbeat on things. And so even when I look at things that have some degree of seriousness to it, I want to find the stories that have the humanity to it, or the positive to it, or to focus on those moments, those little moments. It's kind of, I don't know if you've ever, there's a film called Everything is Beautiful. And in Everything is Beautiful, there's a character in it that's trying to uplift the spirits around him with hope. And it's a very different take on World War II and the suffrage of some of the people that were, having their lives stolen from them. So I like that. I prefer that in storytelling. And so when I hear about something in the news today, in the media, because in all honesty, depending on whatever your hot political take is on this or not, the reality is that when you hear about one government blowing up something that belongs to another government, and that government says, well, we're very unhappy about that, and then you have the awareness that both of these people have lots and lots of things that they can shoot at each other and make everybody's lives very uncomfortable. That's not good. And for some people, that's overwhelming. That's real anxiety-inducing stuff if you look at it from one perspective. If you look at it from another perspective of, this is a lot of stuff about a balloon, and could it just be a balloon blown off track? So thank you, Jim. Jim Luan has said, today a balloon, tomorrow a stuffed animal. Where does this madness end? Where? Tell me. So depending on your perspective on things, you're going to have a different interpretation no matter what from the person beside you. It's just going to be how it is, right? And that's the great debate, is that there's no politics at the table because people have different interpretations of stuff based on experientialism, based on the literature they might have read, or ideologies that they might have been more exposed to, So that's just eat your dinner and shut up, right? But when it comes to trying to make comics and trying to do stories at it can be very challenging. Now, there's people out there like Joe Sacco's one, who does Safe Area Garage Day is about the Bosnian Herzegovina Sarajevo conflict. He's got another comic that he's done about being in Egypt during its conflicts there. Well, one part of their conflicts there, and then he's got A Real Palestine is, of course, another one of his books. I think is probably the most popular. But here's a guy who's, as a reporter in the field, he's doing his job, but at the same time, he's also doing comics, giving a real perspective on the humanity of the situation and trying to talk about the people. Oh, I missed something. Yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah, Sacco's pretty good. Now his take and on his politic on it might not be everybody's agreement, and they might even, despite the fact that he's trying to express perspective on the situation from a frontline take, they don't want to hear it, or they just disagree with it, and that's. I have nothing to say either way. It's not up for me to do. I'm not involved in any of those conflicts, and as a person who I love people, I don't want to see anybody get hurt. So in my mind, both sides need to just settle it down. But I say that about everything. It's a dad. It's like, if you kids don't stop fighting, I'm going to take your toys away. That's dad perspective, right? And so when it comes to the world out there, I honest to goodness, after a while, you just start taking that perspective on the world. And if you countries can't get along, neither of you has got your nuclear missiles. So you can have different perspectives on things. Now, does that mean that necessarily I don't know that I'm necessarily advocating that people do comics specifically about real world things, because that's not my interest, right? So I can't speak to that. I think if they want to do it, and expect that their audience base is those that are specifically that want to read that. There's been a number of comics done about serial killers, and I've read a few of them, but I couldn't get through the book about Ed Gein that was just done by Eric Powell. I think it was Eric Powell, and forgive me if I'm wrong. I couldn't get through it, and it was largely because of I'm dissociating it at this point. It's not for me. And I've read a couple of different things on a couple of different books that have been done over time, like Bendis, back when he was good, did Torso, and there was another comic, Green River Killer, and so there's been a number of different serial killer books beforehand. Or what's that? There was some kid that got really popular on reality television that did a comic about him and Jeff Dahmer or something. I don't know. Again, they're not my bag. But if people feel interested enough to go and buy those, to go and make those, then power to them. That's great. I think that there's so much more story in the world out there that we can look at, and we can celebrate, and we can look at in order to demonstrate the negatives in society too, without having to specifically do it about some specific real world individual, especially some real world individual that did some horrible crap. Like, I just, pardon me for the big C word, but I think that's, I don't want to read it anymore. So as that, and then of course things like what Sacco does, that's conflicting for a lot of people, just depending on their take on what side, or depending on their take of where they feel on the ideas of, any of the ideas that are represented in those books. And of course, any of the other examples that I've used, again, it's hot takes. But my point is this: as political as all these things are, and as political as people's takes are, and the stories that they're doing based on real world events, it doesn't mean that we can't take the real world around us in any way, shape, or form and make something nice, make something fun, make something specific to our own interpretation or our own interest in what's going on around us. There's been fantastic examples of examples that try to look at things in a proactive and positive light. There's, the March. There's as far as it goes, and again, I'm referring to sequential literature. I'm referring to comic books, but there's been a number of different projects that Craig Thompson's Blankets is a fantastic romantic love story regaling something that he went through as a teenager at summer camp and a long distance relationship with a girl that he met there. That's real world stuff. And yet at the same time, it's a perspective piece and a humanist piece. And so, yeah. So when it comes to any of this sort of stuff, my headspace tends to look at that. My headspace tends to look at how can we interpret real world events and real world situations from our own perspective that maybe don't cite specifically real people and real scenarios and real situations. And I'm not interested in glorifying negative behaviors and negative people and negative situations, despite the fact that, what is it? The Life and Hell. I can't remember suddenly. My brain's gone blank. But Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell did an absolutely fantastic interpretation of a perspective on the Jack the Ripper case. And it's wonderful. It's just that, they take some flight of fancy and some creative license in the fact that they get into the assertion of male dominance in architecture across the British landscape, things like that. So, but it's compelling stuff. It's fantastic and interesting stuff to read, but I'm not one that's actively going out of my way to look for different Jack the Ripper books. Gotham by Gaslight is a Batman story by Mignola that features him against Jack the Ripper. And of course, that takes From Hell. Thank you, Gary. From Hell, Life in Hell. Oh, Life in Hell is Matt Groening about the bunny rabbits. Thank you, Gary. Yeah. What was I talking about? I don't know. So, yeah, there's all kinds of different things. Oh, Gotham by Gaslight. Yeah, that's Jack the Ripper and Batman. Real flights of fancy there, right? That's fiction. That's pure fiction, folks. But fun to read. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's my bag. So when it comes to interpreting real world things, and when it comes to looking at real world situations and how do we assess those, and how do we interpret those in our stories, well, that's up to us. They're our stories. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that whatever it is that we're doing from our headspace and our perspective and our creative outlet. And so we can take something like this balloon situation. We can do something that's very serious and a real assessment of what this means and the ramifications of that. That's been done in comics before. Read Brought to Light by Alan Moore and I think it's Alan Moore. Is it Alan Moore or Frank Miller? Bill Stankovich does the art. So, or Sienkiewicz, I can't remember how it's pronounced, but so there's different ways that we can look at stuff. There it is. I had white paper here, but it's all about where we're at, where our headspace is, and our comfort level, and things like that. So, all right. So now I'm doing a map of North America. Where's that, Chris? And we're gonna play a little bit here with our storytelling. And so I'm just throwing this down with a color erase pencil and just getting the shape of this old sucker down. Just, I'm not overly concerned about it being specific and perfect and wonderful, and I'm just getting the shape, the rough shape of it all down here. There's some water over there. It's not that big. Take it easy. Anyways, yeah. There's all kinds of different projects, and there's all kinds of different interpretations of situations and that we can do in comic book form. And there's complete legitimacy in that, but it's a very specific market that's going to read it, and that's fine. There's a market for everything. But as ourselves as creators, the question we need to ask is, what's my take on this from what my perspective, like what perspective have I got? And how do I stick to that? Realization, of course, that not everybody's going to agree with your perspective, and not everybody wants to read that book. Phil, where have you been? Hi, Phil. Thanks for joining us, sir. And I think that when we come at it from a perspective of, I'm just trying to find my story and I'm trying to find something to say, and allow that to be that, it lets go of the concerns about representing the people and representing other people's takes on it. It's your book is your take. Whatever angle you're going to take on it is while your information in it might not be fully agreed upon. Your story. It's no different than anything else. It's your story. And so, ideally, that's enough for you to be able to tell whatever the story is that you want to tell, right? So, I can't stand when people, especially if it's something that takes liberty. Like I read an assessment. They did a television show called Man in the High Castle, and it's actually based on a Philip K. Dick book. And I read a review on that had all these arguments about, well, that wouldn't work if that was a situation if the Nazis actually attacked. It's based on a book. And so that book is already hypotheticalized something that was a possible happenstance. It didn't happen. Well, it wouldn't have happened that way. Well, we don't know. It didn't happen, right? So when we get worked up over something like that, it kind of feels like a pointless thing, and I tend not to get too worked up about that sort of stuff because, the Nazis didn't, win the war in Europe and come over to North America and cause a fuss here. It just didn't happen. So no point in being worked up about it. But Man in the High Castle, it's an interesting book. And the television show, well, I didn't really get too into it. Like I saw a little bit of it and went, yeah, okay. I read the book as a teenager. Books we tend to read as teenagers, they're not the same as when we read them today. Let's be honest. I read Dune as a teenager and I thought, oh, that's transcendent. But I was a teenager, right? My teenager brain went, oh, check out that guy wailing on his guitar. It's, we tend to put things in a larger context the older we get and the more experience we have in life. Yeah. All right. So I'm just putting down some little values here on this paper. And again, I'm going to add a little bit over top as I go. But I'm just getting down the basics. You can look at the map and point it where you are right now if you want on the camera. But, right there. So, yeah. Let that dry for a minute. Back to let's do some fun. Let's do some beautiful balloons. Beautiful, my beautiful. So, yeah, that's the decision-making thing, is about how do we go about telling our stories and how do we go about figuring out where our headspace is on things, and to look at it from a sense of the more that we have, I guess it's an editorial perspective. The more that we have a perspective that allows the assessment of an event, the assessment of a real life thing, the more that we take on it in a sense that is just interpreting the facts and the moments and the situations, I think it leaves us open to a larger audience. And I think because that leaves us open to a larger audience, it's going to make our work available for more people. Now, as some people might say, well, that's a cop-out. You could take a stance on stuff. I'm not one of those people, right? I'm not that kind of a creator. Yeah, there's lots of stuff and lots of dialogue that I'll put into my pieces and lots of perspective on that. But I tend to be more interested in people being nice to each other and happy. I had a rough upbringing. I don't want to focus on the negative. But what I mean by an editorial approach is here's the facts and the information. You interpret it. That's the whole point. We want our readers to look at it and come up with something in their own way, because the fact of the matter is they're going to anyways. I don't know. That's my hot take, folks. But maybe other people have a different perspective on that. Maybe if you've got a consideration that says that it's a duty or a responsibility of some type to have something to say with that, you should take a particular stand. Maybe that's your take on it, and that's completely valid. I'm not going to disagree with anybody on that, because nobody gets to tell you you're wrong for what's going on inside of your head. They just might not agree with what you're doing, and it might not be something that's as readily accepted by the larger world that we live in. But it's yours. It's your thing. Seeing if I can get this to smooch around a little bit. Well, we'll come back to that. So, yeah, I'm trying different takes on the balloon. And I think I'm going to have to replace these paint pens at this point. I think I have officially kicked the poop out of them. So that's an official term. So maybe their time is no longer. Maybe it's time to move on. Get some new pens. Let these fellas go. Is anybody else aware of this balloon thing? Is it that big a deal? Or is this something for people that are, spending their days reading the newspaper from home to find as here's a talking point for around the table. I'm curious as to where other people sit on it. Is this just something that I've come across in my sheltered little existence of not watching the news for a reason? That really doesn't have any impact on the larger world around us. This is a palette knife I'm using today, and just having some fun. Switching some paint around there. Now, there's something else I'm going to try too, which I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about. This is a piece of makeup sponge, and I have been finding that makeup sponge is a pretty versatile tool. Oh, there we go. I like that. I can't tell, but my impression is it's mildly interesting to most and very interesting to people who play politics as a sport. I love that expression. That's a very strong expression. And it's a really kind of fun way of interpreting it. I'm about popping bottles in the club. Yeah, see, that's just as good. I like it. I feel you, Jim. I like the idea of popping bottles in the club as a sport. I like that notion a lot. Gonna make noise for a second, folks. I'm a fan. I'm just gonna try not to blow this topic out of the water. That's I gotta put this up. This is a definite. That sounds exactly like a line in a Luan movie. Yeah. Easy. And it's got to be said. And you got to get somebody, or you got to do that voice that goes, "Yeah, I'm about popping bottles in the club." You got to do that voice for that. That's you know what I'm saying? You feel me? One of the things I like about films, and films like Jim does, is for sure is when we get characters that have those really individual voices. Like there was an actor whose acting name was Slim Pickens. And Slim Pickens was a guy that went, "You listen up here right now." He was actually the there we go. He was actually the voice of the sheriff in the Disney Robin Hood movie. And it's like, "You buzzards are driving me crazy." Like, I love that voice so much, just because it's such an authentic character, a character sound. So it gives him some degree of uniqueness, and that uniqueness is sort of that makes them more memorable. That definitely makes them more memorable. And when you're up against Alan O'Dale, the minstrel, you're competing against a song-singing rooster. You gotta do what you gotta do. All right, so I'm just doing little different images of the balloon and having some different fun. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to try to figure out I don't know if it's writing or if it's the technical devices hanging from the balloon or not, because you can't, how do I know? I'm not up there looking at the actual balloon. It's just these shots we get of it from the ground. But at first, it looks like something that's actually being suspended from the balloon, but I thought it was originally writing on the balloon, which honestly, I was excited about. I was compelled by that. I'm like, oh, that'll be cool. That'll be fun. That's a fun decorative element. Coincidentally, the music that I'm listening to while I'm working is The Reality of My Surroundings by Fishbone. Yeah, there's all kinds of little bits and a business around this. The balloon. There. Looking for this guy. Huh? Where was he? Just bringing this blue from the tape down a little bit to match the actual paper that we're working on. I again, this is my weird hang up about putting in some details that are completely pointless. Like, why is there tape stuck down here? Well, you want to know. So there's something fun and liberating in that. Yeah. I'm going to have some fun in a second with the explosion, because my idea is I'm going to throw some stamps down on a white pad, white ink pad. And then we're going to, finding my white pad. And then I'm going to place those on the image and then build my explosion, my clouds out of it. And another thing that I found with various colored papers is this fun little tidbit. I'm experimenting. Clearly, I have been in these videos of late. I've been experimenting with bleach. And now, when I use the bleach, I have to go out with these pages and spray them. And with a fixative, with a sealant, in order that there's no additional disintegration of the pages after I've done this process to it. But one of the things that I've been finding is that when you spray a little application of the bleach down onto, in case you're wondering what all the clicking is, underneath where my table is that I have a tray where I tend to gather a lot of the tools that I'm using as I'm using them. And so that's the click-clacking sound that you hear while I'm plugging away here. So, okay, so the idea here is that I'm going to take a stamp and I'm going to put white ink on it, and I'm going to smack it around on the surface here, and we're going to build up some texture so that I can actually make that into the explosion of when the balloon gets blown up. And so these different images that I'm assembling together on this same piece of paper, when I scan this page, I can take these different, different points, these little different narrative images, scan them up, and then place them in the page in the context that I want them to be utilized in. I've been doing this. I do this a lot with mixed media stuff, and that's largely because it allows me to just go for it on a piece of paper without having to worry about the structure of maintaining it within borders and panels. Now, I used to do that more regularly. It makes the process take longer. So I got away from it. Okay, sprayer of bleach. Okay, all it is, you can find these at a low-cost store of some kind. You put your bleach inside here, and so when you put a little application of bleach on the page, which I've done here, okay, now I'm going to tab it off, just dab it off a little bit here. And there was ink on this. That was pointless. Okay, we'll do it over here. Okay, so I've got a spray of the bleach there. And so when I come over here, I'll absorb the majority of it. Now, you should see the page, and hopefully it picks up in the camera, but you should see this page. The color of the cardstock is going to wash out where I put this bleach down. So it's kind of like giving us the start of some sort of cloud structures. And as it dries, you can see it picking up more and more. So I'm just going to come at it with the fan for a second. Just to expedite that. So now you can see it. You can see this discoloration now. And that is fun. Oh, that's so fun. That is such fun stuff, Chris. Oh, I'm glad you like it. So this is it's actually a leaf that I'm stamping up here, but I'm just making sure there's no color from the previous whatever I did with this on the stamp. And there may well be, but that's okay. We're going to use that. So it's a white stamp. Now it's picking up in the camera better than it actually is in front of my face. So, but this pattern, this explosive little bit of business, it's just fun details that I can do something with in that center area. And it just, just for fun, just for scuzz, Cleaning off the stamp, cleaning off the stamp. This might be considered sacrilege for some people, but I'll dip the stamp in water just to make sure it gets ink out of all the grooves and really does clean it off. So, all right. So this is a little stamp pad that you pick up. So again, longevity being a real deal for some people. Archival quality. Spray the living baloney out of this after the fact, and that'll pick up on your archival quality. So, okay. Now I'm looking for an image of the explosion, and it's a lot of dust around the explosion itself. But it looks like a real destabilization of the balloon itself. So that's what we're chasing here. working at all. There you go. Is there anything that you think? Okay, so here's my $1 million question. Is there anything out there you think that people should not do comics about? That people should not use the medium of comics to tell stories about, or animation for that matter, or anything, any sort of sequential medium? Is there stuff that maybe there's no necessity to do these things? It is kind of a foolish question, but at the same time, you know, it does bear some wondering, because there are, of course, people going to be, there are going to be, of course, people that say, well, you shouldn't touch these issues. You shouldn't touch this sort of stuff. And, you know, maybe. What do we got? Somebody. Phyllis said politics. Okay. And Gary says, no. I think execution is everything. Anything can be done if it's done well. There you go. Now, what about, okay, with that in mind, what about perspective? And maybe this leads into Phil's expressing politics. Is it because of perspective? Is that what makes it open? When you say being done well, well, done well is still not necessarily, what am I looking for here? Specifically, done well is subjective, right? It's, what do we got? Oh, Jim has said, nope, it's all just a medium to work in. Okay. I think that politics is one of those things that when I was talking about it earlier, I think that okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at context. If you're reading a book about politics, if you're picked up something and it has some take on a certain president, let's use your presidents for an example for our American friends, or our prime minister for our Canadian friends, and whatever your leader is for any other friends. But if somebody's doing a story on the president, prime minister, etc., if their take is, if it's a book based on the political whatnot of the time, and it's a hot take, it's an assessment of that time period, then I think that having a direction on that makes sense for you to do a political book. There's no reason you shouldn't do a political comic. But that's one thing. What about the idea of, let's say we're reading a book about some post-apocalyptic survivors, and they are talking about, you know, well, this political party on this side, whichever side it is, I don't care. It's their fault everything's the way it is because they did this. Let's go collect some firewood and try to cook a rat. You know, try to fit it in the context of that story. Philip says, actually, we're all political all up in this piece this week, or this day. I remember one case years ago, a graphic novel was made about a serial killer. The families of the victims in the book sued the creators of the book. Power to them. I think that might be crossing a line. They're doing the book about, like, if it's a book about real things happening, of course it's going to affect people. IMO, in my opinion, Gary, you already taught me what IMO means. Even very specific positions or perspectives can be executed well. Honestly, I find subjective takes more interesting than objective ones because they tell me more about an individual experience. That's interesting. To me, the question of whether it turns out good or bad is separate. Oh, yeah. Did anybody read Frank Miller's, what was that book called? Frank Miller did, after 300, he did another one where it was a Batman take on the Taliban or something like that. I didn't read it. Did anybody read that? Because that was a hot take. There was a great deal of people that were really in disagreement to that. You know, there's there's a different headspace about that project for a great deal of the readers that picked up the book, and a great deal of people that maybe picked up the book to have a problem with it. I don't know. Again, I didn't read it. But, Frank Miller's a guy who's, been hailed as a really good writer in this industry and has strong takes and strong opinions on stuff. A Holy Terror. It was called Holy Terror. But people said, well, maybe he went a little too far on that. I know somebody that he'll buy certain creators' works no matter what. And I know a lot of people that do that, let's be honest. But he swears by them. Whatever their take, their angle on stuff, that's the right one. Like, he'll agree with those creators, even if they do something that's highly controversial or highly differing in opinion. And that's fine. That's for him. But some of these books are terrible. Like, they're just not good books. They're not executed well. It's kind of like, hey, let's fit a story around my platform. And I think that might be an example of not executed well. I'm going to take the hit of being all controversial here. I got no problem with that. So people feel free to say whatever you feel comfortable saying. I'm not worried about, this isn't monetized. Who we carry? Gary says, yes, Holy Terror, that's right. Using that as an example, poorly done. But should we say don't do topics about this comic? No, I don't think so. I think the lesson is do it better. Here we go. I don't even think it was, for me, I don't even think it was his perspective that I had a problem with. And this is, again, and let's pick a fight. I'm going to pick a fight. I think that Frank had his time at that point. I gave up on Sin City after a while. I mean, at the beginning, Sin City was, for what it was, an interesting approach. But over time, even I got burned out of that. Like, you get burned out of anything, really, right? It's you're kind of stuck in a rut if you collect every single thing by one specific creator for your entire life as a gospel and nobody else. But Gary says, I remember it being not very interesting, sort of adolescent feeling, but a lot of Miller's work feels teenage boyish. It sure does. That's definitely to be said. What I thought was coming, what the approach was towards Sin City at the very beginning. You realize really quick that's not going to land. There's a level here, and it's going to stay at that level, and this is probably disagreeable for some, but I think that the intention was there, but after a while I just felt like I'm reading teenage boy fantasy comic, and I was just really disinterested. When you grow up in a place where there's violence and there's abuses around you, and the world isn't very nice for a lot of people, you tend to really quickly weed out things that glorify that, or really quickly weed out things that look at that as being cool. At least I have. Those experiences in my life have made me who I am. But when you look at it in a kind of exaggerated context that doesn't have a lot of meat to it, other than to say, oh, look at that, isn't that awesome steak? Well, it doesn't mean it's a good tasting steak. I'm going to reference everything as food from now on. So I've done some bleach hits, some ink stamp, a little bit of flacking of white paint. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of a pencil crayon that just sort of mute it all in and blend it all together. What do we got? We got another statement I've missed. I'm sorry. Comics like sci-fi have long waded into the social political perspective. the X-Men could be representative of many marginalized groups. Muties were hated. That's a really interesting take, and that's definitely on the money. That's how many different social groups have the X-Men been related to? You know, everything that is the hot button topic of the day, every big, strong movement that's happening at any given time, people try to say, well, this is what the X-Men are actually really representative of, is people that are going through this. And I think that what works with books like the X-Men, as opposed to books like the Doom Patrol, and those two are highly related, by the way, highly related, there's a highly similar approach initially for both of these projects. Let's say that, and leave it at that. But Doom Patrol talks about people that have experienced suffrage and experienced some life-altering thing, and now they're trying to make of themselves in the world they're in now. Okay, that's Doom Patrol. Whereas X-Men is people that are different and people that are whatever. And you're right. There's so many different social groups and so many different social movements have been assigned to the X-Men are representative of this, that it sort of starts to lose its teeth after a while. But definitely that. The early days was Magneto's Malcolm X and Xavier is Martin Luther King. And, okay, maybe. Bearing in mind this is from the same time period that Jack Kirby designed Darkseid based on Richard Nixon. So, with that in mind, by the way, my favorite thing completely is that Steve Ditko just based the look of Doctor Strange on Vincent Price. That's the coolest thing ever. So if I see a modern take on Vincent Price, I desperately hope that whoever draws it's going to make him look like, or a modern take on Doctor Strange, I desperately hope they're going to make him look like Vincent Price. But it changes everything when you read a Doctor Strange comic when you find that out, because then it becomes, by the holy host of Hogard, I cast thee in the pit of Taboo. That's my terrible Vincent Price. Perplexing. Bring me the newspaper, Wong, that I might see what help people need in the world today. I'm desperate for Bill Hader to do a Doctor Strange sketch where he does his Vincent Price impression and for doing Doctor Strange. Yeah, I would pay cash money for that. In a beat of a heart, I would do so. I'm trying to play with really punching the whites here. But I'm really learning lately that there's a value to just going in Photoshop and really accentuating your whites in certain places. Tony Stark is supposed to be Howard Hughes, right? A lot of those early guys are supposed to be looking like somebody. Here's a really interesting book taken from real life. There's a comic called Streetwise that came out years ago. And Jack Kirby was so busy drawing other people's stuff that seldom did he have a chance to do his own work based on stories that he himself wanted to do. So he did this autobiographical comic about the fights that he would get into as a kid in Brooklyn. I think it's Brooklyn or the Bronx. Growing up in New York City, and block fights where your tenement building would get into a full-scale war with the kids in the tenement building the next over, including gouging each other, brass knuckles, throwing glass bottles at each other, bricks, hitting each other with sticks. Like, just, this is full-on hardcore combat with children. And he did an autobiographical story about growing up in that environment and getting into these things where, you're raking somebody's cheek with your finger in a fight, and it's like, this is horribly brutal stuff. But this is talking about a real thing that would happen in a real time and place. And I find that interesting. I find that I really enjoy. I have that book in my somewhere here, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the fact that he told this story. He went out there and he applied that to a comic tale. And is it the most politically correct thing to talk about this? It's kids. These are kids all fighting like tooth and nail, like their lives are completely dependent on this. And there's nothing to gain here. They still live in the same buildings. It's not like you're in charge of their building or anything like that. It's a zero-sum game. And yet he did this comic on this and about the real life of growing up there. And I really enjoy it. I really think it's fantastic. And so if you get an opportunity for stuff like that, yeah, that's a heck of a thing. Nate Powell did a book called Swallow Me Whole. And it's about a young man whose sister is having some dissociation problems and how it affects the young man. And that's a wonderful thing. Is it, and it's done from, it's his take on it, whether it's his world or not, I don't know. It's none of my business. I just know that as a book, I enjoy the heck out of it. I don't need that extra matter. I don't need that contextualization of whether or not this is real or not. There's Wendell is a comic that was, I'm sorry, the name of the creator is escaping me. Wendell is one of the first really public comics about being a gay man in the 70s. And it's his book. It's for a very specific market that really hit the New York out scene, I think it was, is where it first started. To gain some acceptance, and yet then it became to represent something so much more as time went on, and to a much larger audience. And I remember reading Wendell when I was a young guy, just sheer interest, because there's a very different take on it. 7 minutes a second, 7 miles a second is a comic about homelessness and drug abuse. And unfortunately, that full piece was never truly finished from where its intention was. Snowpiercer is like is a story about going on a train ride. Those are great examples of very individual stories, very subjective, and also, maybe therefore, very interesting. More so than something safe written for anybody. Well, there's the challenge, right? The more that we specifically, identifiably tell a story that is less for the whole and more for the smaller groups, the less than we should expect, to some extent, to be realistic, that this is going to be embraced by all and celebrated wildly and by a gigantic market and all the critics and all of the talky people that want to yap on about stuff that other people are doing. Less and less of that is going to be responding to those projects because they're identifiably about a specific time and place and experience in the world. It shouldn't keep us from doing them, though. Mouse is about the Holocaust. It sure is. There's politics right there. Yep, indeed. Yes, indeedly do. And Mouse is something that, it's really exploring a history with a highly symbolic voice to it. And that highly symbolic voice of representing the anthropomorphization of people, check that word, is what makes it more accessible for others. But unfortunately, with open accessibility, by diffusing it being real people that are going through that, by having those people be mice, It makes it more open for more. It makes it less impactful, though, I think, as well, because it's not people we're talking about. As we are, yes, mouse does. But when you do them as mice, it steps it back a bit. I've talked in my videos about that paradox of the more personal you can get, the more relatable your work ends up being. The more crowd-pleasing you try to be, the more empty it feels. I don't know, Gary, because Everybody Loves Raymond is highly successful. I watch it right after Friends. The more generalized and sitcom-ish, the more standardized a story becomes. Unfortunately, there's a massive market that likes simplicity. It's a massive market that likes simplicity. As much as, okay, Northrop Frye, here we go, look out. Northrop Frye talked about, now Northrop Frye was a professor at University of Toronto, and he talked about how the more that we engage in something, the more that we read books, eat food, okay, watch dancing competitions, it doesn't matter, it's arbitrary, whatever it is. The more that we develop an interest and develop an aesthetic appreciation of something, whatever it is, and the more that we therefore intake of it, you cannot help but to start to develop some more sophistication of any of those things. And it's whether or not you accept or reject said sophistication. It's whether or not you accept or reject its quality and the quality of the things that you further on imbibe. If you're only going to read Stephen King books, you're probably only going to like Stephen King books. And your entire basis of comparison is on which are the good and which are the bad Stephen King books. Not taking anything away from Stephen King. But if your whole world is just reading Stephen King, that's your basis of reference. That's your level of sophistication as far as it goes for what the larger expanse of literature is. Okay? The more that you try and read different things, let's say science fiction. If you're only reading one science fiction author, that's your basis of comparison. If you're trying to read, well, I only read the classics. Well, okay, then that's your basis of comparison. But if the more that you try to take in of any and all things, and this is just a given in life, and yet despite that, some people some people need to hear that, right? So when it comes to whatever it is that we're trying to do, comics or books or any kind of writing or any kind of animations or films or any of these projects that we're trying to endeavor to create, lyrics in a song, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But any of these things that we're trying to put together, we need to take into account the fact that our perspective and our unique individual take on that, and the way that we interpret these ideas and these things, we put them down on the paper. The more that we're very specific about this is good and this is bad, that limits our audience. The more that we're generalized and broad, that opens up our audience for them to all take their own interpretation away from what we're saying. And yet at the same time, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but I think that I prefer your take, your voice, your interesting perspective on something. Am I going to agree with your politic, depending on whoever it is doing it, whatever it is that you're saying? Probably not. Probably not to some extent, because we're all going to have a different perspective on everything and based on who we are and what we've lived. But it doesn't mean that I wouldn't rather prefer to watch, let's say, House of Fools. If you don't know what that show is, look it up. As a TV show to watch, it's Mortimer and Reeves, by the way, the British comedians. I would sooner watch House of Fools for its ridiculousness than I would watch Everybody Loves Raymond. I would sooner watch Lie to Me, which was a really fantastic show and a really interesting show about a person who would profile people, and he was like a human lie detector. Then I would watch Criminal Minds. And that's a really close example from one to the other. But the Lie to Me had little different structures in there. That Criminal Minds was just completely formulaic. Whereas Lie to Me, yeah, there was a formulaic aspect. It was always about discerning lies in each episode. but it's a different taste, right? Because that person's doing it from a unique perspective. Jim says, people can sense real and people can sense desperation. Totally agree. There you go. I prefer real. You have to prefer real. I would prefer that. I find it more interesting to read something that has a unique and authentic voice about somebody who has suffered some kind of hardship and wants to go out and make change in the world with whatever facility that they have, and to do something different with that level of accommodation and facility that they have to improve the world around them in order that other people may be saved and from experiencing what they did, then I would like to read a Batman book, which is supposed to be the same thing, you know, but isn't there other unique ways and new unique perspectives that those stories can be told and deal with real world issues and deal with real world situations? There's The Prodigy, I think it's called, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's a book that's out, I think it's Millarverse. I'm not sure right now at the moment, but it's about basically Superman arrives in the American South as a baby, and he's black, right? I think and it's during the period where I think it's the 1800s, 17. I'm not sure if it's 18 or 1700s. I'm sorry, I haven't read it in some time. But that's a very different take on doing a Superman book. You know, is doing something that has something to say about a specific time and place in politics. So, yeah, I enjoyed reading that first series. Now they're supposed to be coming out with more, so. But it has a unique take, and it feels to me to be somewhat more connected to actual real events and real true history and real true experience that people have gone through. But yeah, you know, is there a book that anyone's read that really just bothered the heck out of them when they read it, just because it was something that was supposed to be indicative of time and place experience, whatever it is, and yet you feel like it completely missed the mark? Is there anybody that's had that experience with something? So this is the explosion. This is what the explosion part is supposed to be. Or a film, or a novel, or a documentary. Gary, you've said some interesting things lately about Andor, that you've had some hot takes on your homestretch broadcast that have some really interesting takes about Andor and Disney in general that I really enjoyed, about the headspace of Disney and how Andor has all kinds of material that's inside of it that represents a lot of what's going on in the world today. I thought that was an interesting take. How did you feel about the She-Hulk show? Okay, so now I need to draw airplane flying by it and whatnot. Or maybe I'll go back to the map. Where's the map? There it is. Yeah, okay. So there's a flight path of this sucker. Andor was amazing. On topic, it's a good example of how genre can give a writer some cover. Set your rebellion show in space and it won't polarize people like, say, a Cuban Revolution show would. Jim says, Andor reminds me of a really, really cool sci-fi pulp novel. Feels really OG Star Wars to me. I have not seen She-Hulk, only the first episode. Did you get through the whole first episode? That's my question. I have not seen. I don't want to see it. Not on any level. The commercials are enough for me. And and yet there's all kinds of things that here. So here's the problem: is that when you have critics and when you have show creators tell people this represents, and this is supposed to example this, and this is this. I don't think that works. And the reason that I don't think that works is if people feel that that's what that is and that's what that represents and that's what's going on, they tend to make that up themselves. I did see the whole first episode. I'm told it gets better, but it didn't hook me. Yeah, I have seen the commercials for She-Hulk, and that was enough for me. I just I don't know. The superhero movie genre is just sort of running its course right now. I find there's certain things that stand apart in the superhero genre, and that is things like Logan. Logan is interesting to me because, honestly, it's a remake of Shane, but that's something that has some interest to me. There's trying to think of what other examples. Guardians of the Galaxy was a real fun romp, a heist movie. It felt like, like there's just the movies that have a different take on something and they clothe it in this other genre. I like that a lot. Jim says She-Hulk silly, but I found myself really liking it. The lead actress is great, corny, but in a good way, like an old comic book. If they really push the corny aspect, that's awesome. I think the commercials I saw were just all really bad. They're really bad examples of CGI, but the meat of the story wasn't there at all. So that did make me want to watch it. I don't like to talk about what I think DBSM is about and what I'm trying to do. I think the audience can have a personal experience. You're gonna no, it isn't. I sat through with my roommates. I found it kind of bland, some funny moments, but I was mostly bored with it. I'm getting negative. Anybody that sees this, if you haven't had an opportunity to read DBSM, let's go. Get it together. Get a copy of it. The creator of it's a bit eccentric, but he's got a good mom and pop kind of a job, and he's a nice kid. He's good at singing. Gotta ask him to sing for you. Read his book. I don't know if that's the kind of advertisement that book wants. There you go. Here we are, Phil. This is just I'm worried, guys. I'm really worried. Yeah, there's anytime that any material that comes out and it says this is supposed to be like this, we created like a real problem with that was the remake of Ghostbusters, where they switched the gender of the entire the cast. And while if it was its own film and doing its own thing, I mean, maybe that would have been interesting. But when you do this and you make all these pointed statements about, well, this is why it's going to happen and people are going to like it because it's this. That wasn't the case. People didn't like it. And some of it had something to do with the fact that they were told this is why you should like it. This is, you better like it for these reasons. That doesn't work. So yeah, that's a tough one. I think that when people read my one-page comics, I think you need to realize how completely serious that I am. There's no jokes in those at all. It's all of it is said very, very, very seriously. That statement is going to be watched one day by a person that doesn't understand sarcasm at all. And I did it to myself. So playing up this map angle, playing up these different sky shots of the different things that are going to be happening in panels. It's interesting to me that under the camera, the white stamp really shows up, but it doesn't. It's almost completely invisible actually on the paper. I'm curious to see how this shows up in the scanning. And there's a real loss of value in the balloons, and yet there's a nice, again, it really shows up quite differently on the page. Maybe I got a bad camera, or maybe it's just that it's just how it picks up information. But the idea that I first outlined on this page here is where some of these panels are going to come together. I've got to draw this panel. So this panel's here. This panel's here. I've got to draw this one. This panel is going to be down here. I think I might reverse the order here so that this sinks behind here, just for interest's sake. And then the last panel is going to sit over top like so, and that's the boat cleanup. So I missed something. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to keep up. I'm not a huge Ghostbusters fan, but I think the mistake there was a misunderstanding of what people liked about Ghostbusters. It's the proton packs and concept. It isn't the proton packs and concept. It's that old cast. It's like remaking Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford. I think that they will remake Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford. I do. It's not going to be anytime soon, but I believe they will remake Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford. I think that, when Steven Spielberg's son starts making films, he's going to redo some of his dad's old films and bring him up into the modern age. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know what I mean. Indiana Jones, I think it had a real shot of having that kid, whoever it was that was supposed to play his son. I think that if whatever this Indiana Jones is movie that's coming out now, I think that if they had taken off from that last one that they made and the film that's out now or coming out now or whatever, if that's 2 years from now, who knows when it's coming, but well, everybody else probably. But I think they really should have done that. Should have had his son pick up the mantle and have him be a mentor character, a dad doing the Sean Connery role that Sean Connery did for his brief appearance there. I think that would have been fantastic, because then you could have had an organic passing of a mantle that I think that people would have been quite pleased by. Have him actually become the persona that his father was, and in response to him, and at the same time, we know for a fact that the dad character is really equipped. I think that could have been really compelling. But member berries. So for this muted color effect, it's just the side of the pencil crayon. I don't even know that actor's name. Oh, somebody just wrote it down. I don't think people like Shia LaBeouf, though. Well, that's too bad. I liked it. I didn't see him as any different one way or another. I just thought he was an obnoxious guy from the 1950s. I think that's what he was supposed to be. Maybe he's too controversial in real life. I think people would have been okay with that, but this is just me. I think the core magic of Indiana Jones is young Harrison Ford in the 30s and 40s, and you can't really recreate that. No, I mean that is that's what I mean, like by the fact that if you wanted to do these future stories or continuing stories, you can't replicate Harrison Ford. I don't care how much deep faked whatever nonsense is out there. Mr. Ford is Mr. Ford. But you could have continued the structural narrative and the story further with his son, or moved on beyond that. But no, you can't. That's it. That time period is over. That was Harrison's peak time, was around the Nazis and just before, just after. So, yeah. Phil agrees with you, Gary. Well, I agree with you. That's rough, right? And that's the huge mistake that gets made, is that when people miss where the value was, where people miss where, well, what was the allure? What was the actual attention to it? Was it the proton packs? Was it the actual characters? And when you try to simulate that engagement and that action, it's not going to work because you're not them, right? Maybe someone would come up with a whole new adventure story and instead of trying to tap into retro nostalgia. Philip, I love you, brother, but you don't understand how Hollywood works at all. It's all about regurgitation. Why can't we get a Rocketeer remake? That's what I'm saying. Oh my God, yes. And why can't it star the actors that were in the original as the mentors of the new Rocketeer? Right? No, that time's done. That's a prime example of let it go and start a new Rocketeer film with somebody finding an old 50s nostalgia. Did anybody here read Starman by James Robinson and Tony Harris? That is the perfect way to reinterpret a character, to reinterpret a concept, to take something and bring it into a whole new time period with a whole new aesthetic. You can take those old characters, but what you're doing structurally and what you're doing identifiably with the voice in the story is wholly new. I would argue that Starman by James Robinson and Tony Harris is a fantastic way to do it. I mean, he doesn't, his dad with his whole yellow and red outfit, he doesn't even do that. He does a Hawaiian shirt and a leather jacket that has a astrology design on the back of it. It has nothing to do with astronomy. He knows this. And but it'll do. It's got stars in it. Like, even he makes that concession in the story. You know, he wears welding goggles because the rod that he uses that harnesses his cosmic energy, it's too bright. It's too bright on his eyes. So he wears welding goggles. I mean, that's, and other than that, he's wearing jeans and boots. Like, it's the new Starman. It's the new take on it. And it was wonderful. It, not only well written, not only well created, but well enjoyed. You know, that's how you take the nostalgia and you let it go, but you still, reinvestigate it in a new way, in a new material with new perspective, and do so successfully. Starman was really praised when it came out. Like, that was just a really well done project. I want more, by the way. I want more of something like that from those guys. I don't know that it'll ever happen, but they've incorporated all the Starmans, because there have been 5 Starmans at that point by DC Comics, and they've incorporated all of them into that title at different points in time. And some of them made sense of it. So that was kind of cool. All right. Well, this has been wonderful. This has been a good talk, and it's really important that when we're looking at story and when we're looking at the accessibility of story and how can we go about telling something with our own voice, and how can we go about talking about issues, talking about what's in the news, or talking about actual events that have happened in time and place and human experiences. I think we came up with some fantastic structure on how that makes some sense, and how we can make a little bit more of our stories by providing an interesting take on how we're interpreting that. Is it right or wrong? It's yours. It's the creator's, right? There's going to be somebody out there that agrees with it. There's going to be somebody out there that it respects and appreciates that unique and individual take, that unique and individual style, that voice, that narrative of understanding that you're going to have that the next one's not, and assess it from that. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think it's a really compelling thing. And I hope that people don't rule that out. If there's an opportunity for you to do something like that, who knows what the result could be. It could be something really, really interesting that people have been actively looking for and waiting for somebody to make for them to read, or maybe just waiting for you. But I think the only other takeaway that I have from all this is that even those, and this, even those works that we don't specifically mean to be interpreting the events of the day, or interpreting things that have happened that are relatable to the experiences that characters in our pieces are going through, I think that even when you do something as loosely connected as that, we may not consciously be realizing that we're putting our hot take. We're doing our hot take of those issues and events and experiences and times and places, and the affectation on those individuals in the same way as we're assessing how it affects the individuals that are in our stories. It's like Andor is representing all kinds of other conflicts in time, in other all kinds of different places in the real world that we live in, without actually doing it, by actually doing it on different planets and different characters, and in a galaxy long ago, far, far away, right? So that's fun. That's something fun to explore. I tend to find those are the stories that are more interesting to me than 100 fart jokes to read on the John. You know what I mean? So yeah, I really appreciate everybody's interaction today. I really appreciate this dialogue that we've all been able to share together as we go. And this is the sort of stuff that kindles the flame in me. I really appreciate, and people are, even if you've already given me a one-page suggestion, you're always welcome to throw more my way. Let's say Gary's. See, that sounds like a line from a Jim Luan film right there. Why can't we get a Rocketeer remake? That's what I'm saying. So, yeah, anybody that's got one-page comic ideas, one or two sentences, take it easy. I don't want a script. Please feel free to shoot them at me, put them in the comments someplace or somewhere, or send it by pigeon. Right? I've been in and out of here, but at least I could sit in on most of it. Well, I appreciate that. I really appreciate you doing that. That's great. And interacting too. You, for a person who's been in and out, you're with it. There's a lot to be said for that, and I really look forward to the opportunity to explore all kinds of different ideas and all kinds of different topics and all kinds of different things as I go. What's this? The art casters have the Chinese balloon on? What? Maybe they should. Maybe that should be the new logo. I don't know. I don't think I get the reference, Gary. I'm probably loosey-goosey in the brain pan here. Did I say something like that? Did I say art casters? I don't know. I'm getting old. All right. Yeah. One-page suggestions, feel free to shoot them my way. That's a one-page comic idea. The art casters with the Chinese balloon on it. I don't even know how to start that. What is that? In the future, man lands on Mars and establishes the first intergalactic coffee shop. Hold on. All right. Look at what I'm doing. I'm keeping a list. I'm keeping it on a big piece of paper so you don't lose it, everybody. In the future, Gary, I like the idea. It's just I'm doing a balloon. I don't want to, do more balloon things. In the future, man lands on Mars and establishes first. Sorry for my sloppy writing. Intergalactic. Anyway. Yeah, guess what I'm going to have to listen to now. Here we go. Well, that's tomorrow's. I've got other ones. I'm still looking for that page that I had the other ones on, but and I'm sorry for anybody that sent me another one and I haven't got to it yet. So feel free to keep them coming. And at the same time, please keep creating. Please keep doing what you're doing. Please, if you have an opportunity, look at what each other are up to. Frank is trying to put together something here. If anybody's had an opportunity, look up Frank Salazar. Salazar Comic Nation. I can't remember what his channel's called, but Frank wants to do an anthology. I don't. Take a look. Maybe that's a thing. So this is tomorrow's topic. In the future, man lands on Mars and establishes first intergalactic coffee shop. Shout that in. Shout it in. All right. That's it for now. Tomorrow's post will be my beautiful. And thanks very much, everybody, for interacting and chatting it up today. Keep creating. Keep doing your thing. We'll talk then.